Hello, it's time for Combat Patrol Carnage. So we're back with another episode of Combat Patrol Carnage, and we're starting our final issue from Delivery 12, which is issue 46, and it's another paint issue, but it's the first issue where we're going to be covering highlighting. So our paint guide is all about the technique of highlighting, teaching you the different ways you can highlight using the side and the tip of your brush. It's a really nice and in-depth tutorial, which I really do like, plus the actual tutorial itself, updating our Space Marines and Eldar, actually does mention that this is a completely optional stage, which I really do like, because I, for one, am not the biggest fan of edge highlighting. If I do highlight, it'll either be with a dry brush, or maybe with a select edge highlight, so I'm not having to do every armor panel. Usually I'll do the most forward-facing ones. It's like tops and knees, helmets, etc. But the fact that this tutorial says everything is completely optional is great. You can either try this out on a few models, which I'm going to be doing for this collection. I'm going to be focusing it mainly on all the character and maybe elite units for the collection. Or you can not do it at all, which is fantastic. But yeah, it goes through showing us how to use our 2 new paints plus 1 from a previous issue. So we highlight our Space Marines and our Aeldari, utilising our new colours. We have some lore, looking again at the orcs, and then we have next page of the core rules, which looks at the full 40k special mission only war, which is a sort of a basic mission, but it's ideal for you to sort of have a nice quick game where it's a nice mixture. It's all about defeating the enemy and also claiming objectives, which is pretty cool. So it's a nice introductory battle. Then continuing our play articles, we have the Combat Patrol rules for the Aeldari, so our Enhancements, Secondaries and Stratagems. And for Chaos Space Marines, we finally get their faction abilities, so Dark Pax is taught to us. So we'll be having a full game of Combat Patrol. It'll be the Aeldari, and they'll be facing off against the Space Marines in one of the newer missions. Haven't decided which one as of filming this, but I should do by the time we get around to the actual game. So as you've seen from the cover, the paints we get are 2 layer paints. We get Stormhost Silver. For a silver, it's a little too bright for my liking, especially going straight on top of the colours we've used already. It's a bit of a stark contrast. I do prefer a mid silver for highlight and use this as a dot highlight more than anything. And we get Night Quest or Flesh, which is actually a colour that's fairly new, and it's actually grown on me as a good way of doing leather, which is what we're going to be using it for on our Combat Patrols. So before we hit the table and update our models, which I've got the Librarian for looking at leathers, the Captain for looking at the armour, and our Farseer for looking at the gold and the gems. Don't forget to do all the usual, which is like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop me a comment down below. Love hearing back from you guys. It goes a massive way to help this channel get noticed more, and I love having a good conversation with you about this awesome hobby. Finally then, Combat Patrol Carnage is proudly sponsored by warbay.shop, your one-stop supply for all your hobby needs. They stock everything you need for your entire Warhammer journey, grabbing your first models, expanding into a full army, adding that final highlight with a select colour, and of course, decorating your hobby and gaming areas with awesome artworks. Check out the link in the video description as usual for warbay.shop, or head down to their physical store and check out these items in person, and you might just find your next hobby project at a bit of a discount. Right, shake your paints and we'll head to the table and update our Space Marine and Aeldari models. So here we are with issue 46 for our first time. So we've got our 2 new paints, so Stormhost Silver, a lovely bright silver, but as I said in the introduction, it's a little too bright for my liking. But it's what we're giving for the magazine, so it's kind of what we're stuck with. And our other paint here is Night Quest of Flesh, a fairly new addition to the range. Came out with, I think it is 3rd edition Age of Sigmar. Might be wrong. But it's a nice sort of mid chocolatey brown. Perfect for highlighting dark flesh as well as levers, which is what the magazine is going to get us to do. So I put those two to the side, along with Calgar Blue, which we're going to be needing for part of this tutorial, because we've got our Space Marine Captain, who's going to be used to highlight the power armor. Our Librarian here is going to be used to highlight the leather. And our Farseer here is going to be used to highlight, well, pretty much everything. So we'll put these guys to one side and we can dive straight on into our tutorials. Here we go. What do we have to deal with? So for our paint guides, we have highlighting technique 7 and updates to your models, our new guide. Read articles, it's just the one with brutal but cunning, another look at the orcs. Then for our play articles, we have Only War, the basic sort of 40k mission. And then we have Rules of the Aeldari Part 2, which will look at our stratagems, secondaries and enhancements. And we get Part 1 of our Chaos Space Marine rules with the look at the Dark Pact's ability. Right, moving on then, well, starting actually, we have a look at highlighting. So technique, highlighting. Follow this guide to learn how to highlight the miniatures in your collection. This is an advanced technique requiring good brush control. It is up to you whether to highlight some, all, or even none of your models. When you see the highlight keyword in guides, you can refer back to this article so you know what to do. So we got our small layer brush here. Your small layer brush is an ideal tool for highlighting because the bristles are good size and shape. However, you can use it whichever brush you prefer. So tip of the brush. Use the tip of your brush where you want more precise control. For example, to pick out small details. Side of your brush. Use the side of your brush to deposit paint on sharp edges, for example the sharp corners of Terminator armor. Thinning your paint. You may want to thin your paint so that it's easier to control. If so, place your paint on your palette and add a drop of water. Gently mix the water into the paint until it is the same consistency. If the paint still isn't thin enough, add more water and mix again. Take care not to add too much water or the paint will become very thin and runny, and it will be much harder for you to control. So you want to find a nice mixture. Usually I'd say 2 to 3 parts water to 1 little bit of paint is usually a good balance. Loading your brush. If you choose to thin your paint, clean your brush and dry it on a paper towel. Then dip the tip of your brush into your paint. Pull the brush outwards and away from the paint. Make a gentle twisting motion to help pull the bristles into a tight point. Your brush should now look like this. However, if you overloaded it by accident, you can always wash the paint off and start again. So yeah, you don't want to have too much on your brush, just enough that you can sort of touch it to your models and it will come off onto the models itself, onto the areas you're wanting to highlight. Using your brush. You will find highlighting easier if you use the correct part of your brush. Read this part of the guide to discover the types of features on your models and which parts of the brush is best to paint each of them. So using the side of your brush, when to use the side. Use the side of your brush when you have the highlight sharp edges. Load a minimum of paint onto the brush, then pass the side over the raised edge in a smooth motion. Check your models for angles of 90 degrees or less. The armor on this Terminator is a perfect example of the feature with lots of sharp edges. So the yellow lines here indicate where all your sharp edges are. There are even sharper edges going across the tops of your scanner area here. So yeah, use these on perfect places to the side of your brush. So when you're using the side of your brush, you should aim to have it right on the edge, balance across both sides as shown here. So yeah, sort of hit it roughly about halfway. Move your brush along the raised edge in a smooth sweeping motion so that you deposit an even amount of paint along its length. If you thin your paint, you will find it flows more easier from the bristles. This will help you to paint lines in a single stroke. And it's a good idea to also draw the paint towards you. That way you can keep your hand a little bit more steadier and you can see what you're doing and avoid making mistakes. There is a mistake, so if you put too much pressure on the brush, your bristles will splay out from their point, as shown here. And the paint is then released from the brush in a splodge. So we've got a bit of a splodge here. You can even see a bit of a splodge here, even going gently. You've left too much paint. This is fixable, and I've shown you how to do it before in videos. Basically, you go back in with your base coat and reduce the area of mistake. Using the tip of your brush. When to use the tip. Use the tip of your brush when you're highlighting areas where there is no sharp angle. This includes angles significantly over 90 degrees and softer rounded shapes. The muscles on the back of the orc boys are a great example of a feature with soft edges that will need to be painted with the brush tip. To begin, load your brush with paint. Next, place the tip of your brush on a corner of the area you're wanting to highlight. Using consistent pressure and a smooth motion, follow the shape that you want to highlight using the tip of your brush. So you can see here we're going around the edge of the orc's muscles, giving it a nice highlight. When you're highlighting soft shapes, they are more forgiving than angular shapes, so you can vary the width of the highlight. And you can see here we're highlighting the Space Marine Captain's cape, and yeah, you've got various different thin lines and chunky lines here, showing a good way of how to make use of the softness of the texture. Remember to keep your brush clean at all times. It will last longer if the bristles aren't clogged with paint. So yeah, the tutorial we had with the dry brush issue is a pretty good one. So leave your brush to soak for a bit and then clean it off on a piece of paper towel and rinse and repeat. So an example of highlighting metallics. Metallic paint may need more thinning than regular paint. If you find that your paint is too thick, simply add a small quantity of water to it. If you choose to thin your paint down, be aware that metallic paints get to a point where the metal flakes will separate from the paint. Metallic paint can also dry out quickly. If you are spending a long time highlighting, your paint may start to dry out and thicken again. If your paint does start to dry, you can add more paint if you're using a palette, or close and shake the pot if you're painting straight from the pot. You may find metallic flakes will clog up your bristles on your brush. Make sure to wash it out at regular intervals to prevent this from happening. We've got an example tutorial on how to highlight faces next. I won't read it too much as it's pretty in depth, but basically you want to think about the different areas of the face and what to highlight first. So in this example we're highlighting the bridge of the nose as well as the eyebrows first, cheekbones, the jawline, well, around the mouth and the chin, the jawline, as well as the brow and the I have no idea what these actual parts are called. The bits of sort of run down the side of your jaw, side of your nose, down around your mouth. And then we have a tutorial on how to paint faces, paint eyes and mouths. So base coat the areas highlighted yellow to the inside of the mouth and the eyes, so catch and flesh. Use a dot of pallid witch flesh for the eyes and line and teeth. And finally Abaddon black to pick out the pupil on the eyes. And you could even add a little bit of screaming pink or something for your tongues if you want to do that. So next up we have how to paint models and updating. So follow this guide to update your existing collection with the highlighting techniques that is detailed on technique page 7. Highlighting is optional. You might choose to not use it at all. You may wish to use it only on important models such as leaders, or you could use it on your whole collection if you are feeling ambitious. So first off, we're using Calgar Blue, and we're using it to highlight all the power armor on our Space Marines, including the Chaplain. So this is where a lot of people will disagree. It's not really a good idea to highlight blacks with blues. It's kind of a weird way, but I know what they're doing. They're doing it to help differentiate, because I reckon we'll be highlighting these soft seals later on with greys. You can do it a little different. You could highlight the soft seals with Mechanica Standard Grey and then the black armour with Administratum Grey. That way you got a bit of a difference between the two. But yeah, I guess it's a way of showing the blue-black to the armour. It's a way you can do it, but it's not the best. But we'll be seeing this technique used on our Chaos Space Marines at a later date as well. So yeah, look for all your different edges. You may need to use the side of your brush, or on points like the elbow pads here, you might want to use the tip of your brush. I really don't get how people can do both edges of such thin areas. Like, the wrist guards and the trims of the shoulder pads. That's just, yeah. How? Moving on to Stormhost Silver, which I would have done last. I would have done Night Quest of Flesh first, so you do all your matte colours and then you do metallics last, save having to change your waters. Yeah, highlighting the gold details, so our shoulder pads and our Aquila, all the silver and brassy areas as well. So you've got stuff like backpack vents, the canisters, the pistol grips, the reliquaries. Don't forget to get all the icons on your chaplain's bike, as well as power swords and a teleport homer, and the ventings as well. Finally, Night Quest of Flesh then is used to highlight stuff like pouches and belts and straps. So pick these out. We've got our librarian's book here, which is what we're going to be doing on camera in just a bit. So it's going to be a long video, this one, but the paint guide should be fairly quick and simple. Then that's how Space Marine's done. And our Aeldari, we're doing the same. Calgar Blue is going to be used for gems and eye lenses. Stormhost Silver for pretty much all our gold and silver areas. So the backs of our engines on our jet bikes, the spear on our Farseer, as well as the sword on our Wraithlord, and the Farseer's armour. Then we've got a little bit of Night Quest of Flesh there on the pouch as well. And there we see our updated Aeldari models. Yeah, looking good, but still a long way from finished. Right, let's bring the paint in and we'll put these into practice, shall we? So we have our models here, as well as our paints, and I've got a couple of paint brushes ready to use. So we've got the small layer brush here, but as you can see, it's a little battle worn. The tip's starting to bend, and there's a stray bristle that won't stay in line. But I've also got the good old starter brush, which is actually to the point where it's almost perfect for using to edge highlight, as well as pick out flatter areas as well. So we'll see which one I prefer throughout the video. So we'll need our Farseer, so we'll bring him forward. So the first colour we're going to want is Calgar Blue, so we'll get some of this ready on a palette. So our first model we're going to highlight then is going to be our Space Marine Captain. So we'll load up a little bit of paint onto my brush. So you can see we're not too overloaded. And then onto our model, so we'll pick out the edges first. So simple smooth motion, pulling the brush towards ourselves. You can see I made a few splodges there, but all in all he's still looking rather good. So just load up your brush fresh again if you need to. Trace your edgings and do this all around the model. When it comes to areas like the detailed section on the top here, we can use a thinner brush. Paint is starting to dry, so let's refreshen it with some water. And we can trace a line with the tip of our brush like so. When it comes to our Farseer and picking out the gems, we want to try and get the topmost area where the light will catch. So luckily on both these gems, yeah, it's a fairly easy area to get. And we'll also want to get the eyes as well, so using the tip of our brush here, just want to try and dot in a highlighter blue on the eyes. There we go, it looks a little better than it was before, which is looking too dark. So it looks pretty good now. Moving along into our next new colour, it's Night Quest of Flesh, and this one's going to be used for leather details. So we've got the book on the back of our librarian, and we've got the little pouch on the front of our Farseer there to highlight. So let's give this pot a shake, because it's a brand new pot. So is Calgar Blue, I realised I hadn't actually opened it yet. But give this a shake, and a little crack lid. There we have, like I said, it's like a sort of a milk chocolate sort of colour. Going to be perfect for leathers. So I'll get this prepared and we can apply this to our models. So onto our librarian's book then. And so we're going to pick out all the sharp edges first, using the edge of our brush. And we'll load up a little bit of fresh, and you can now trace around the smaller details that we can't get with the edge of our brush. So just gently tapping the brush more than anything. Then onto our farseer, we just want to pick out the edges of this pouch. So get the top and then the side. That's a little too much, let's try that again. So there's a nice example of an overloaded brush. So we just want to get a little bit on the top of the pouch. And we want to trace the curve, even a darker brown there in the recesses, in the shadows. And our last colour is Stormhost Silver. We're going to want to give this a bit more of a shake, as this is metallic paint, so it tends to separate more than the matte colours do. So as you're giving it a good shake, you can crack the lid. And yeah, look at that lovely smooth mixture. So I'll get some of this ready and we can start highlighting our farseer. So let's reload our brush with fresh paint. Make sure it's not too overloaded. And really for this, we're going to try and just sort of touch highlight more than anything. So gently tap the brush against the areas you want to highlight. So all of this gold filigree. We've got the bangles here, which we can use the side of our brush to get the upper facing areas. Now we can get the sharp edges of the spear. And using the tip of our brush, we can draw down the central line. And that went horrible towards the end. So there we go, that's a bit better. So there we go, we've finished our highlighting. As you can see, I've got all those sharp edges on our Terminator captain here. We've got the leather casing done on our librarian. And catch the light right. It's a bit of a pale colour, but the overall effect is there. And we've also got all the details highlighted on our farseer. So yeah, looking a lot better now. But there we have it. That's it for, well, this video. Up next then we got lore and gaming articles to cover before we have a full game of Combat Patrol, where these two factions get to face each other. So there we go. All that's left for me to do is to say thank you all very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time on more Combat Patrol Carnage. Goodbye.